All right, everybody. It's a little after 2 in the afternoon on the 18th. And again, welcome to Workshop Wednesday. Thanks so much. Today's webinar will be talking about FleetCommander version 5.11 and 5.12. So I think a lot of you have probably been wondering where we were with product release updates. We've been rather busy doing a lot of things. And I think, if you've seen some of our communications recently, we've been spending an awful lot of time in the back end of FleetCommander. And so as we got into the development of 5.11 and looked at some of the key functions, we thought it made sense to merge them together. So today we're going to talk about all the changes that have occurred in 5.11 and 5.12. So thanks very much, and we'll begin. So as always, this webinar is being recorded. So at the end of the webinar, we will be making a link available where you can download both a copy of the video as well as a copy of the deck. So again, thanks for your patience on that. We certainly appreciate you attending. For those of you that are new, this is our monthly, FleetCommander Knowledge Series, and we typically break it into a couple of sessions. First and third months of the quarter, we talk about things that are more topical to FleetCommander. And then in a month, it's middle of the month, or I should say middle of the quarter, it's typically a hands-on session. So look forward to some, coming attractions there as well. It's always 2 to 3 Eastern time, so we want to make sure we keep a set schedule to make it easy for you folks to plan your calendar around. We really appreciate it. So if you would, at the end of the presentation today, there's going to be a QR code. Please use your smart device, snap the QR code, tell us what you think. We're looking for, your feedback, because your feedback and input makes this the session that it is. So thanks so much for that. And your mic will be muted during the webinar. If you do want to ask questions, we're going to use the chat window, within Teams to do that. So I think a lot of you folks are familiar with that today. You can click the Show Conversation button, and then at the bottom, please tell us who you are and the organization along with your question. Okay. So today's agenda. First of all, I'm Joe. I think a lot of you folks know me. I'm a Senior Director of Client Success at Agile. And we're going to be talking about a wide variety of things today: product enhancements and updates, some enhancements to reporting, platform modernization, release schedule, release notes, and any questions and follow-up that you may have, as well as things that we put out there to help you be more successfully using FleetCommander and the survey. So with that, we'll begin. So in terms of product enhancements and updates, there are some really interesting and new great features that we've introduced with 5.11 and 5.12. First and foremost, we've introduced a vehicle import tool. So the vehicle import tool allows system administrators now to create imports and bring their own data into FleetCommander. That's a really big step. So you're able to really, any changes to your vehicles, i.e. new vehicles that you want to add to the fleet, you can create these using the vehicle import tool. There's 2 file types, either Excel or text-based. And the way that we've constructed the overall process is when you first select the vehicle import tool, you're going to see that there's a way where you can download a sample template. So either an XLS file or a text file. So you pick one, it'll pop up a new window, and it'll give you an example of what that file structure looks like. Okay. As you can see, there's a lot of fields that are, within the import tool itself. So, required fields, you have to have data in them. It's as simple as that, really. And then optional fields are, well, optional. You don't have to have any data in there. But the thing that you got to remember is, as you get into using the tool, you have to make sure that you're not deleting columns from the Excel file or the text file. So, from a process standpoint, once you decide to download a template and you create your file. So again, this kind of walks you through the process of, choosing a file, saving it locally. Okay. And then, again, you'll just save it. It'll save it to your local device next. And then you can basically see, what you want to do. So once you get your template downloaded and your data in the template, the next step will be to, use the tool to import the file you've just created. So it's really important, and there's a couple of validations here that you really need to think about. So, first and foremost, it's going to ask you to confirm, do you really want to do it? And then what it's going to do is it's going to take a look at the data that you provided within the file. So as I mentioned before, you cannot use it to update existing data. You can use it to append, i.e. add new data. So if you do get to a situation where you're uploading a lot of records, the system will give you some validation messages that says, X number of rows were successfully validated, i.e. those are unique and new vehicles to the system. And any, number of rows contained errors, and that may be something as simple as, either missing data, or it could be that the vehicle or the asset already exists. Okay. And again, it's only going to import if all records are in the correct format. So that's very, very, very important. So you got to make sure that when you download the template, any required fields are populated. Otherwise, the system will reject it and it will display errors. All right. And then, again, as you get into this, you do have that ability to cancel and import, during the process if you so desire. So if you're looking at the data before you import it, you can always click cancel if you see that there's something going on with it, correct it, and then update it again. All right. So those are the things that you want to be careful about. Now, this is a really important piece of the process. And so a lot of you folks know, especially if you've been using vehicles for a long time, we use things like access groups and usage types to help the system know where and how the vehicle is being used throughout the process. So anytime you bring some data into the system, new vehicles into the system, once you get done doing the initial validation, which is shown here below, the system is going to ask you to select the access group or groups in usage type or types that are relevant for the records you've imported. So from a best practice standpoint, what you really want to think about is if you have a variety of access groups, or if you have a variety of usage types, what you want to do is you want to create your imports so they're specific to those different groups. So in this case, we're going to apply everything to everything. So that's really, really easy. But, if you had a record and it was just a bus, and you had another record and it was just a pickup truck, you might want to create two separate files, one for the bus, one for the pickup truck, and then associate them, excuse me, with the correct access group and usage type. Okay. So that's a really important point here that you need to kind of think about and plan ahead as you look at the data. All right. And that's really as simple as, vehicle, the vehicle import tool is. It's a very straightforward process. The thing you always have to remember is, FleetCommander is license based. So, if you can't load more vehicles than what your licenses allow. So you got to be a little bit careful of that. So you have to know how many vehicle licenses or how many vehicles you have left before you hit the license, and you cannot exceed it. Otherwise, it will give you an error message. All right. The next thing that we're going to talk about is vehicle replacement. So a number of our clients have asked us for a way to generate, vehicle replacement and manage vehicle replacement modeling. So, what this is it really looks at creating a set of functionality where you can set up parameters against the vehicle, assign points to them, and then have the system go through and take a look at the data based on that parameterized data, assess points, and then generate a list of whether you've got a bunch of really excellent vehicles, some fair vehicles, some good vehicles, some vehicles that are poor and should be replaced, or some vehicles that are really, really bad and should do something else with. So fundamentally, as I mentioned, it's a points-based system. So high to low, I should say low to high. So categories with low points, those that tend to be excellent. Categories with high points tend to be worse off. And so again, we want to make sure that as we aggregate this data, vehicles with the higher number of points are the ones that are identified as needing replacement. And there's multiple releases planned for this functionality. So as we get into, FleetCommander, version, release 13, and then ultimately release 6, we'll have a couple of other iterations of this, which continue to build out this tool and add more capabilities of it. The initial scoring of this is, looking at three parameters: the age of the vehicle, the amount of miles or odometer on the vehicle, and then the condition of the vehicle. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. But fundamentally, it's changes to the vehicle profile to identify or to include a replacement condition as well. And then the system will, allow you to create and generate a vehicle replacement report. And we'll cover each of these moving forward. So, as I mentioned, the first phase of this is to think about the configuration based on the following categories: the age, number of years, meter, typically miles, and then the replacement condition. And so these are all parameter driven. It could be excellent, fair, good, poor, whatever it is. And as we, kind of talk through and walk through this, you'll be able to see that it's really the sum of the three categories: the age plus the odometer plus the condition equals the amount of points that's assessed against the vehicle, and then where it falls into the range of, whether it's good, bad, or something else. All ranges have effectively, a similar range. That's a little bit of a kind of a, clumsy statement. I apologize. But basically what this is doing is it's basically saying that as you look at the tables, they're all basically the same. So you're not going to be able to overlap them. So when you create one parameter, it starts and ends. When the end of that starts the next, the end of that starts the next. So that's what we mean by that. And you can see that, as you enter the upper limit of a range, it will then go into the corresponding for the next row. You can't overlap it, as I mentioned, in that, the points can be the same number for multiple ranges if you so desire. So again, the tool is designed to give you a lot of flexibility. The less points, better the vehicle is. The higher points, the worse it is. Okay. So here's a good example as we talk about age. So again, as we think about this, we're defining a range, something greater than or equal to 0. And then we're setting a parameter that says, okay, we want to capture things that are less than, in this case, less than 2 years old. And so if we had vehicles 0 to 2 years old, we'd assess a point. And then the next row will say, well, now this is greater than or equal to 2 and potentially less than or equal to 4 years. And we'd say that's worth 3 points. And so you can see that as we start building the table, we've got the ability to add, a number of different parameters in place. So if you wanted to go, potentially 0 to 10 or 0 to 9 or 0 to 5, whatever it is, you could go off and do that. And then you could set your points based on whatever you think those parameters are. In this example, we're basically ending at 100. So you can see that we're only using, basically 6 categories of points here. And then the other 4 are basically for the future. So if you wanted to rerun the table or do something like that, you can. The next one, gets into the meter. So odometer is about the vehicle. And you can see that in this case, you're trying to really think about this holistically. So if you think about the first slide, we're talking about age and it's 0 to 2 years. And on the meter, we're talking about an odometer range of 0 to, in this case, 25,000. So you may want to think about this in terms of a multiple of how you're using the vehicle. So if you're planning to do 15,000 miles a year, if that's your baseline, then your first parameter set might be 0 to 15,000. And then the second one might be 15 to 30. And then the third one, 30 to 45, et cetera. So again, you can keep building that. And then as you think about the prior tab where it defines age, if you're doing this by year, you can say, okay, my first parameter might be, 0 to 1, and then 1 to 2, 2 to 3, et cetera. So again, you can try and match those up, any way you want. And again, it's flexible in terms of you determining the point value for this. So if you look at a vehicle and you say, well, it's less than, 25,000 miles, it's an excellent, theoretically, it's an excellent condition, and that has the lowest point. It could be 1, it could be 3. It could be 4, but fundamentally, you want to make sure that your point values are probably some multiple of this based on what your mileage values are. Okay, so again, if you're going 25, 50, 75, 100, you may want to do it in a very similar fashion. So it could be 3, 6, 9, 12, et cetera. Okay, so try and keep some consistency to the model because that'll give you, better and more consistent data. The next one that we get into is condition. So in this case, very similar model. So again, we've got, the situation where we can say, okay, what are my ranges of condition? So, typically folks will do an assessment on an annual basis at some point, and they'll say, well, they've got a grading standard, whether it's good, excellent, fair, poor, unsafe, whatever that may be. And again, they may have, points, and it could be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. It could be 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 25, et cetera. So, the points are variable, and then this gives us the ability to just sort the data. The nice thing about this one is that as we think about a vehicle, what we can do is we can set a default status. So we'll get into this in a minute. But fundamentally, one of the changes that we made to the vehicle record is we've introduced a vehicle condition parameter. And so by setting the default, when you create a record, it's automatically going to populate to that value. And then we can decide over time whether or not we want to have these active or inactive. So you may decide to set this up and you may say, well, I really don't have unsafe. I want to keep it in play for a while, but you can, deactivate it for the time being. Okay. The next thing is we've talked a little bit about, the vehicle profile itself. So what we've done is we've added a couple of parameters on this. In the first one is we've included a little report toggle. So do you want to include this in any reporting that you do against the vehicle? So it's yes or no. So if you say yes, you can assess the points and the system will look at the different parameters of the vehicle, how old it is, what the mileage is, the condition, et cetera. And then it's going to go off and it's going to generate that report. Certainly, if you choose no, then it will not show up in the report. So you may elect to use that on certain kinds of equipment. So if you've got a bunch of very light duty or low speed vehicles, golf carts, et cetera, that you really just run into the ground, you may not care about that. So you could always exclude them from the report so that it doesn't clutter the report at the end of the day. And then for everything else, you would probably want to show those on a report. Now, a couple of things for you to think about. And it's really important that as you think about your vehicle profile, you've got to make sure that you've got, things like, first available date. So make sure your dates are consistent, within the vehicle profile so that the system has a place to baseline its information from. So, so if you don't have any dates in the system, well, it's going to be hard for it to assess the vehicle's age and then calculate points. All right. And again, the next one, as we start thinking about this, we can then describe, again, what the categories are. So, as we said here, each row represents the rating category and the number of points. So in this context, what we're doing is we're using this as the summation of age, meter, and condition. And so once you aggregate all of that data, we're saying, hey, vehicles that are excellent, they're less than 10 points. Vehicles that are good are less than 20, vehicles that are fair are less than 40, vehicles that are poor are less than 60, right? So greater than 40, less than 60, et cetera. And then anything else is, kind of up to 999. Those are the ones that you really want to replace. So it's always important to remember that we're starting with a min value and going to a max value. The max value of the first row is the min value of the second row, and so on and so forth. Okay. The next piece of this is actually generating data. So you can see that we've created a pretty comprehensive, interface here that allows you to get a lot of different data out of the system. So, you can look at, when records were created, when they were modified, when they were first available. So again, when they were last available. So again, that helps you identify, potentially when you put the vehicle in, when it was first available. And again, you may use one versus the other if you had a vehicle in place. Let's say you had a vehicle, and you acquired it, in March, but you didn't get it into the system, potentially until, September, your first available date could be March, right? So again, you want to make sure that you're properly baselining and anchoring the vehicle in the system. You've got the ability to manage the data by site, by type, by location, by model. as well as then, sub-select things like responsible users, departments, owners, and owner department. If you want to go to the extreme of, years, colors, and makes, you can do that. Show me all my blue cars and tell me what kind of shape they're in. If you want to look at it by make and say, show me all my Fords or all my Chevys or all my, Rams. So lots of flexibility here. And then obviously you can do available and unavailable. And then you can certainly sub-select by access group. So again, it gives you lots and lots of capabilities, to really fine tune the data to see, where you have specific situations that you need to address. Like always, it's important to remember, the less you select, the more data you have. So as you go through this interface and you start selecting variables or parameters, the more parameters that you select, the less data you get. So depending upon where you want to go, you need to kind of think about that and how it's going to help you, achieve the goal. When we talk about the replacement report, you can see that from the from an HTML side, it's grouped by replacement category. So we're going to export things like the status, the name, the year, the replacement points, the meter replacement points, the condition, and condition replacement points, as well as the total. So what it wants to do is it wants to give you a list of your vehicles and say, here's exactly what you told me, and it's going to be grouped by whether it's excellent, good, fair, poor, or unsafe. So however you define those categories, that's how the categories are ultimately used in the report. And this is an example of what it might look like. So again, you can see that as we've gone through the system, we've got basically the statuses of the vehicle. We've got, the vehicle name. We've got whatever the year is. We know how many points we've attributed to that. The meter, how many points we've attributed to that. The condition, how many points we've attributed to that. And then ultimately what the total replacement points are. So again, you can see that we're assessing, in this case, less than 10, less than 20. In this case, this was, less than 40. And this was, less than, 60. So you can kind of see how the data comes together and what you can do with the data. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is phase one of the project. We're going to be expanding this significantly more in the next release and then the release after that. So right now we're planning up to 3 different releases. And as you start looking at this, it would be great to get your feedback, because then as we look at follow-on phases of this, we can make decisions about, gee, that's a really great suggestion. We should add this, or, make this change or do something else. So please, oh, please, as you look at this, give us your feedback about it. Okay. So now we've got a few other additional program changes that I want to talk about. So, first and foremost is, thinking about late vehicles and late return vehicles. I think previously, as you folks have used FleetCommander, you may have seen situations where you've run various kinds of reports, or you've looked at the dashboard and you've said, how many vehicles are in use? And you've noticed that there may have been an issue where the vehicle count seemed incorrect, i.e., gee, I had, 2 vehicles in use, one was actively in use and one was late, and the system was only showing you the one actively in use. And so, we certainly recognize that that was incorrect. So what we've done is we've changed the way that late returns are calculated and counted in the system. So basically, as long as a vehicle is still in use, even if it's late, it still counts as being in use, which is really the right, way to handle that data. So what we've done is we've taken a look at the current vehicle availability, and you can see that here on your dashboard. And so what we've done is we've changed the logic so that now, regardless of whether it's late or not, it's going to show up in that count, right? So if it's late, if it's in service, it's going to show up as in use. And then the next piece about it is, down in this lower quadrant about motor pool activity, we're now counting that in the, the gross sum of vehicles in use. So again, previously we excluded that. If you had one vehicle late out of those 28, it would have shown you 27 in use. Now it more accurately reflects, vehicles in use. So that's an important point there. The other thing that we've done here is we had an issue where, from a document and content manager, there were some issues where, when deleting files, people were receiving errors. for a variety of reasons, whether it was an access denied error or, some other kind of file error. And so what we've done is we've cleaned the logic up so that we no longer have that situation. If by chance, you do run into anything here again, please do let us know, but we think we have this resolved once and for all, so that's kind of a nice thing. The other thing is, we've had a lot of people ask us about kind of a forgot password, I should say, not forgot, but show password, when they get into the kiosk. So we've added a little toggle on the FleetCommander kiosk screen. So when the user goes in, they can basically say show password or not show password. So again, it helps the user enter their data more consistently, makes it a little bit easier. And again, they can see what it is. And again, all logins are logged for security reasons. So we do know, if somebody tried to log in and they were denied permission. All right. The next thing is, again, along the authentication path is, added more specific messaging about OAuth. So a lot of you folks today use OAuth as your single sign-on as your single sign-on method. And, we've had situations where, people tried to log into the kiosk and they did not have a user profile set up. And so now we return a, kind of a friendly message that says, hey, if a profile doesn't exist, you don't have a profile. So again, it's going to help them reach out to Fleet, Fleet Assists, Fleet Services, Fleet Contact to get a profile set up, should they need one. Maintenance and parts. So a little bit of cleanup on the maintenance and parts side. Previously we had an issue where, we were showing a part ID and the part ID is not the part. So what we've done is we've corrected the logic so that we're now showing the correct information there. So now, when you look at the report, instead of it showing it, kind of the part ID, which is, really the record number here, it now shows you exactly what the part is. So again, makes it easier, makes it more consistent, and corrects a little bit of a defect there. Similar to the conversation I introduced about the dashboard and about counting vehicles in use, we've also cleaned up a couple of the reports. So again, motor pool utilization. When you think about, again, those vehicles, we've now corrected the logic so it now more accurately shows your vehicles in use as well as your hours used. And so that's going to be in the following areas. So when you look at the motor pool utilization report or the motor pool utilization by asset type, and examples of both of those are shown, left and right, you can now see where, we've got, we're showing that data a little bit differently. So now we're counting, the vehicles in use, even if they're late, and you'll have, better data in those reports. A couple of other enhancements for you. So the asset data dump report, previously we had added a number of fields on the vehicle record as we introduced TCO and in the ability to calculate your own replacement fund / depreciation. And so now what we've done is we've added those into the data dump so that now if you do have information in the system, so, you've associated an account number against the vehicle, you've identified the salvage value percentage, you've identified, any expected cost increase, i.e. CPI, from a replacement standpoint, and then whether or not you've decided not to depreciate it for whatever reason. That data is now available, within the data dump, and you can more easily mine it and use it and update your data. Okay. And then just a couple of other little last things, and that is adding vehicle site and vehicle locations to missing mileage. So, many folks use the missing mileage report. It's a great report, especially where you've got vehicle sharing involved. It helps you, control the integrity of the data, from an odometer standpoint. And, it prevents situations where, somebody potentially, took a vehicle and then may not have returned the keys or may not have returned the keys on a timely basis and then used it. And then you have these gaps in the odometer. So again, it shows you where those situations exist. And now it shows you the specific place where it exists or where it occurred. So, that's a nice little feature and a nice little enhancement there. A couple of other things on the reporting side, and that is, excuse me, on the detailed billing report, we're using a duration in days column, and so now that's going to show the correct number of days from the of the duration of the reservation, so start to end. So it's a little bit more accurate there. There was a problem calculating that. We've changed the vehicle usage report, so again, it's got a reservation usage type filter. We've tried to clean up the filter crew to make it a little bit more precise, and we've corrected some issues where, we were getting some wrapping of the data. So hopefully that's going to make it a little bit easier to use and to work with. On the mileage cost report, excuse me, we basically now show maintenance total, when running it more than a year. So again, there were some situations when we were running it for longer periods of time and it wasn't, calculating the correct values. That's now been resolved. And then lastly, the aging by time report, again, the site filter wasn't working properly, so we've corrected that. So a couple of nice little enhancements there. A couple of other little things, and that is user extra detail report. So I think a lot of you folks were kind of frustrated a little bit, because we got to the situation where, and again, you look at the left side of the screen, you can see that we were using merged cells in the report. And I think we'll all agree that merged cells aren't great when you're trying to manipulate data. So what we've done is we've gotten rid of the merged cells. And so now you'll see just the data sequentially in the same cell. So it makes it a little bit easier to handle. You can do more with the report now in terms of sorting, filtering, etc. So, that's a nice little change to the report. And the big one on this is, again, .NET. I think a lot of you folks know that we've been on a, .NET transition path for a while. And we're in the throes of wrapping it up throughout the application. So it's a major step forward for FleetCommander in its capabilities moving forward. And all of these reports, have not changed functionally, but they have all been rewritten to take advantage of .NET, and that gives us some capabilities moving forward to make further enhancements and changes to them. So there's been quite a lot of effort and resource placed on, getting the system on a modern code base, and I'm happy to say we're there. So, look forward to even more changes coming down the road. The next piece that I want to talk a little bit about is TCO. So from a TCO standpoint, we've made some changes in terms of the dump, basically the data dump report. So again, it's a report to take, your TCO data out of the system and do something with it, especially if you're trying to calculate total cost of ownership. So the nice thing about this is that we've added another type. So we've added a CSV export type in addition to Excel and HTML. Now, it's really important that when you look at TCO and really any report in FleetCommander, if you're trying to export a lot of data, don't use HTML, because fundamentally what happens is the server can only, handle and process a certain size, block of data. And so a lot of times if you're trying to generate a file and it's got thousands and thousands and thousands of records, you quickly exceed the capability of the server. So anytime you're trying to generate large files, we always recommend use Excel because the system will just drop it right into Excel and it prevents that problem. So, always use Excel for larger files. If it's a smaller file and you want to just look at the data or just check out what it looks to be, you can use HTML. But in this case, we're limiting it to 1,000 records. So just be wary of that. Okay. We've also made some changes in terms of, kind of the posting utilities and the filtering. So, as you can see, we've had kind of a prior interface here where we just searched it based on date. And now we've added lots of other capabilities in here. So we've added, kind of a transaction date, date range. We've got a reporting period date, TCO category, TCO subcategories, sites, locations, and asset types. So again, this really gives you some pretty cool capabilities when you start thinking about this, because if you're thinking about managing your fleet and you're thinking about understanding the costs in a certain asset type, now you have the ability to look at it, between a date range or within a specific posting date for specific categories. So again, as you start thinking about TCO, you know that we've got fixed and variable expense categories, and so there's great flexibility in terms of structuring the subcategories that roll up into it. So fixed costs again, overhead, insurance, replacement fund or depreciation, variable costs, fuel, maintenance. So again, these are the kinds of things that you want to consider when looking at TCO down the road. From a mapping standpoint, we've also changed a lot in the mapping tool. So again, previously, and again, the mapping tool is used to really get those charges back to a reservation. So if your billing model is such that you want to take those vehicle costs and charge them to somebody else for whatever their use is, this tool will help you get there. So again, what it allows you to do is select the record type based on your mapping. And again, you can see I want to do potentially other miscellaneous things, and maybe you've got things like cleaning fees, but again, this gives you the ability to charge back for that use. And then obviously whether or not, there's any kind of message, you can create that here. So again, if you need to set a comment against it, you can do that as well. Fundamentally, what it does is it then helps you look at the reservation, and you can say, well, now I want to match my transactions in TCO based on, is it based on hours? Is it based on days? And again, you can pick the specific match type. So I only want to do transactions with matches. So again, transaction exists within the range of where the reservation exists, right? Or you can find things without matches or things that are written without matches. So again, depending on what your model is, this gives you a lot of flexibility. The other thing is that, and again, talked a little bit about that. And then the other thing is, as we get into it, we can look at specific usage types. So maybe you only care about doing this for daily rental, or maybe you want to do it for department. So you have that capability to select how you match the data against the reservation and against the usage type to export the data out. And so again, you can see that the usage type, again, this goes back to the vehicle profile. So when we talk about kind of this full circle of looking at a vehicle, potentially importing data, vehicle data into FleetCommander, the usage type is one of the things that we have to set against the vehicle, right? As well as the asset type. So those are kinds of things that we have to take care of. And again, by having those set properly, now we're able to do something with the data and manipulate the data more. So again, if you think about this situation, we say, in this case, we want to generate charges for everything but. And so in this case, we say, well, I don't want to do department. Well, this could easily be, I don't want to do external rental or long-term or department or whatever it is. So again, you have that ability to select those categories. You can save it default, or you can just continue here. So again, some pretty good flexibility there. And then as you generate the tool, what the tool is going to do is it's going to show you exactly where you've got matching data. So again, if I've got a reservation and that reservation has a start and end date, I'm going to be looking for transactions that either potentially fall within or fall outside of that. And so in this case, I can say, okay, great. These may have, fallen into the start and end date. So again, I'm going to accept the match, and this one doesn't. So I could say, well, maybe I want to skip that one. So it's really, pretty powerful here. If there are matches, again, we've hyperlinked the data. So if somebody has a question about, well, exactly what was that, you can drill into that record right from the user interface. So again, it's pretty flexible and pretty easy to use. And then once you get through that, you can see that, again, any matches, they're going to appear in it. And you've got some, capabilities here where you can have certain kinds of things that say, don't ever match it, skip it, accept it with, match to, whatever it is. So again, if you've got, some things that you have to match or you have to change, you can use the match to. If you don't want to do anything, you can just say, well, I don't want to charge this, so just ignore it and don't ever try and do it. Or you could just say, well, you know what, I'm not sure about this one for now, so let's skip it. And so if you skip it, the next time you run it, it'll come back into play and you can reassess it there. So again, really pretty powerful in terms of, what the capabilities are here. And again, so ignore, it'll never try and match it again. Skip just leaves it in the review. for the next time, accept it, takes it and moves on, and then match to allows you to reset it to a specific transaction. And you can see here, where we're trying to match it to a specific reservation. So again, it's going to give us, the status, the mileage, the confirmation, the driver, and certainly the duration of the trip. So you can exactly see, how that data is being assessed and what it's trying to match it to. Okay. And, so again, it's pretty easy and it's very, very straightforward. And then once you've identified the various entries, whether you're going to skip it, match it, ignore it, whatever it is, you basically just finalize it and generate the billing. So, this is something that, depending on how your billing is set up, if it's something you're interested in, you may need to come back to the support folks and have the query about, well, how do I use this? How do I get this into my billing? So just keep that in the back of your mind. And then lastly, as we look at this, you can see that when we generate this, it's going to basically come back with a message that says, yes, your transactions were mapped and the billing charges were created. So again, you get positive confirmation at the end of the process that says everything is completed properly. And then lastly, once you get into mapping, the charges show up on the record. So if you go back to the source reservation, whatever that is, you can see where you've created, that transaction, and it's now going to show up in the billing tab. So again, it really tries to streamline the process where you've taken your expense data and now you've brought it back into your reservation, and it shows up in the billing tab against that reservation. So again, it should really, make life a lot easier for a lot of folks that are using, billing and trying to liquidate their costs at the end of the day. Okay. Couple of things just to kind of, get towards the end, and that is release schedule. So right now we're finishing up the beta releases. Those are happening imminently. And so we expect to be running beta releases through the end of October and probably the very first week of November. So over the next 2 or so weeks. Once we get through the beta releases, we'll start scheduling the agile hosted releases. So again, we'll do beta release. We've left a little bit of time in there just in case somebody comes back with, clients does some testing and they come back and say, gee, I noticed an issue with A, B, and C. It gives us some time to fix that, and we test it and we release it. But fundamentally, if everything goes good, the latest that we're looking at from a production standpoint is to start rolling that out into our agile hosted sites beginning late November. And then for self-hosted clients, we're looking at probably 30 days later is typically what happens. So, close to the end of the year. And again, there'll be more information, as we, get to finalizing that stage. Self-hosted clients, that data is always available in the support portal once we announce it, which I think you all know. Release notes. So as we generate the release notes, they're always put into the support portal. So, please feel free to check the support portal. Everybody should have, credentials. If you need credentials, please, reach out to the support team and they can get you set up with it. But fundamentally, at this point in time, release notes are subject to change because, again, if we find something, during our testing and, we're going to mitigate it and then we'll update the release notes. But, we are starting to publish the release notes to the portal. So that's going to be your one source for getting this information as the releases are put into production. Any questions today? No questions. Okay. Just a couple of things in closing, right? So again, we generally appreciate your business and your partnership. That's what we're all about is Agile Fleet. We want to make sure that we're here to help you. So, as you look at, things that you need to do to improve your business, please feel free to reach out to us, whether it's assistance in implementing new features. So if you're interested in doing TCO, reach out. We'll help you get set up and make sure that it's configured properly for you.
Hey, Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so actually there's a number in there, Joe, if you want to
Let me go into that. I did not see anything pop up in my Q&A, so give me a sec. Sorry about that, folks.
And it's under the chat instead of the Q&A.
Sorry, I was in the wrong place. I didn't see the flag there. Let me see what we got today. So, in terms of the first question, so let me just scroll to the top real quick. So, Michael, where will the needed fields be accessible in the future? So I assume that is for the condition reporting. So there's going to be a specific table underneath the configuration area that you're going to be able to use to configure condition reporting. And those will appear in the navigation links. Okay. Let's see. So what is replacement condition derived from? So the original condition, when we think about setting the initial assessment, that's something that your team would do. Excuse me. So a lot of the fleets that I've worked with in the past, what they'll do is they'll go through and they'll do an annual assessment of their vehicles. So typically they bring it into the shop, whether it's an internal shop or an external shop, and they've got a checklist that they go by, and sometimes it's a lot of these same factors that we talked about. How old is it? How many miles are on it? What kind of condition is it in? What kind of condition is the body in fundamentally? And they make those, broad assessments. As we start looking at things down the road, we'll be factoring more cost aspects into this. So it'll take the subjective ones, some of the subjective ones, and then, marry those up to, more of the operating cost pieces as well. So you get, the age, the mileage, the cost to kind of help you do that. But fundamentally, the initial assessment is based on something that you may do. As I mentioned, we do have a default setting on the vehicle. So when we set the vehicle up, we can say, well, all of our vehicles are going to be good, and we can set a default setting of good. And then as you start going through the reports and generating your replacement, it'll tell you whether they're really excellent or really good or really fair, or really poor, or something else. Okay. Different classes of vehicles. So in terms of Mike, in terms of the ranges today, the ranges aren't by type at this point, but that's an excellent point, right? So that's something that's planned down the road where we can have additional classes of vehicles, because again, ultimately you don't want to treat everything the same way because they're fundamentally different kinds of vehicles. So light duty is different than heavy duty, which is different than complex assets. So we want to make sure that we have the right types of parameters in place to support those as well. So today, no. Down the road, yes. So the show password does not have security answers. It does not ask them. So fundamentally, show password is where people go into the kiosk and they enter in their login ID and they enter in their password and it's not working. They say, gee, I thought I entered the right number or the right password. It would be great if I could see what it was. And because again, people fat finger the password. So it's not designed to reset the password. It's just designed to show them what they entered. And if that's incorrect, then they have to go through the password reset process in FleetCommander. And in that case, we'll send them a token, they'll reset the password, and then they'll be on. If they're using single sign-on, obviously, then that's done in a different place, and it doesn't really impact us here. Okay. Let's see. Capture usage on vehicles where you put the mileage in manually. So Bonnie, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but hang on for a second. Let's go look for you, and we'll put your mic on.
I just enabled her, Joe. Oops, sorry.
Did you just do it and then I turned it off? Sorry.
I think so. Okay, she's on now.
So Bonnie, you want to elaborate? Yeah, I can't hear her.
Try it one more time.
Yeah, give her one more time. And Bonnie, if we can't get your mic enabled on this one, do me a favor and reach out to me after this, and we'll have a brief discussion.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. Thank you so much.
Okay. So we have take-home vehicles, and we have to put the mileage in monthly.
Yep.
And when we run a usage report, it doesn't capture those vehicles on a usage report.
I would say, why don't we do this, Bonnie? Why don't we take that one offline and we can look at your data and your setup, because it may be something in the setup.
Okay.
Let's do that. So if you drop me a note, let me know when you're available, and we'll connect up and we'll go through it.
As after this meeting?
Yeah, we should be able to do a quick call after this meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, do you see any other questions?
Someone asked if this recording would be available, and it will.
It is.
And I just pasted a link to, we have a YouTube playlist where we keep all of the Workshop Wednesday videos. So it'll be added there. And if you folks want to subscribe or bookmark that link, all of this video series will be there for you.
Great. Like I say, just in closing, again, if you need any help, please do reach out to us. Think about, excuse me, especially as you get into TCO, fuel is an integral component of that. How do you handle it? How do you recover it if that's something you need to do? Remember that we've got 5 standard algorithms for billing. And again, kiosks and key boxes are your friends. So they really help eliminate overhead and streamline process. So they're always great things, to implement, to really take the burden off of you and your staff. FleetCommander user conference. We missed you. So I think some of you folks were there. There were a number of folks that weren't there, but we had lots of folks at UT, University of Tennessee, Knoxville this year. We did kicked off our client advisory board. We had a half a day of on-site training. We did maintenance refresher. We had, both a university, higher ed, as well as commercial government utility roundtables. Number of clients, presented, how they were using FleetCommander and the different things that they were doing to it, doing with it. Lots of interactive sessions, as well as lots of networking and other fun. So, we'll be, we're in the planning mode for now Command 22. We've changed the name of the user conference to Command, and so it'll be Command 24 next year. And there should be some announcements, coming out sometime in late December, early January, that talks about the next venue and, what the agenda looks like. So hopefully we'll be able to see you there. And then next month, we're going to be getting back into reporting a little bit. So this is getting into reports. You should be using Chapter 2. We covered some of the basic reports back in June. And so this will give us, a little bit more deep dive into some of the reporting that folks have asked for. So we look forward to seeing you in November. And again, as always, we always provide you with the links to the specific content month by month. So again, as you get a copy of the deck, you'll be able to see and go back in history and see different kinds of things that help you really manage and optimize your site. And then again, resourcing. So again, if you need any help or if you have any questions, we generate a lot of content. So, feel free to, please look at our website, take a look at, the kinds of content that we put up there, both from a webinar standpoint, as well as case studies, white papers, and blogs. So lots of great information there. And then again, thought leader, so please, oh, please, I'm going to ask nicely, please fill out our survey. It's going to be a QR code. There's a link even here. So, whether or not you click the link when you get the deck or snap the QR code, it only takes a minute to give us your feedback, and we genuinely appreciate it. It really helps us set the tone for what the future content looks like. Where do you need help? What can we help you out with? The folks need specific information and process about how to do something, within the application. So please do that. And then, some of the things that we do is, we've made lots of stops over the last, year, visiting clients across the country, doing reviews about their business, how Fleet Commander is helping them, what they can do better. So that may be something that you want to take advantage of. If it is, please reach out to me and, tell me who you are, and we'll get something on the books for you. And it's always great because, at the end of the day, it's all about helping you understand the value that you're getting out of the system, what it's doing for you. And it certainly highlights your accomplishments that you can share within your internal teams and management. And, we'd love to hear from you too, to really think about your business more globally, and, maybe share with your successes with the broader community. So everybody loves a great story. We've got a lot of clients that have done a lot of great things over time with Fleet Commander, and they've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, we'd like to include you in that as well. And so, if you are open to discussing a case study and how you've used Fleet Commander and the kinds of success that it's brought, please let me know, and I'll connect you with Mike, who was just, speaking a moment ago. And, he'd love to talk and, kind of help you with that as well. Snap the QR code. Let me know what you think. And thank you for attending.